There are moments in life when your strength has run dry, when the words won't come, and the answers never do. When you've tried everything, and nothing seems to move. So, you do the only thing left. You close your eyes, you lower your voice, and you whisper something into the silence, hoping the silence is listening. That's prayer, but not just words thrown into the sky. Prayer is a remembering, a returning, a sacred act of aligning your deepest pain with your highest hope. Because prayer isn't just asking, it's anchoring. It's the soul's way of saying, even in this, I believe. When everything unravels, when the strength we've relied on fades and the answers we once clung to dissolve, prayer steps in not as a desperate cry into the void, but as a powerful act of trust. We often mistake prayer for a last resort, reserved for moments when we've exhausted every other option. But what if it's not a fallback at all? What if it's meant to be our starting point? To pray is to relinquish the illusion that we are meant to bear it all alone. It's an invitation to honesty, a sacred space where we confess our fears without shame, where we speak our longing without the pressure to have it all figured out. In that moment of surrender, something deep begins to shift, not always outside us, but always within. The chaos might still swirl. The circumstances may remain unresolved, but inside, we find a quiet knowing, a stillness that defies explanation. Prayer moves us from panic to presence. It roots us, grounding us not in certainty, but in connection with the divine, with purpose. And even with our own humanity, it turns striving into surrender, not as an act of weakness, but as the ultimate strength, the kind that trusts in something greater than ourselves. In Christianity, it is taught that when we are weak, then we are strong. Judaism embraces the power of crying out in faith, trusting that even unanswered prayers are heard. In Islam, prayer is seen as a direct link between the soul and its creator rhythm that reminds us 5 times a day that we are never alone. Hinduism teaches that the act of surrender through devotion leads to liberation, that peace rises when we align with divine will rather than personal control. Across countless pots, the message is echoed. In letting go, we receive. We often want immediate answers, relief, rescue. But sometimes the most profound gift is the transformation that happens in the waiting. In prayer, we are refined. We become people of resilience, of hope, of steady strength, not because life is easier, but because we are no longer carrying it alone. Let prayer be more than a lifeline. Let it be your anchor. Let it teach you to pause before reacting, to lean in before lashing out, to rise each day with a quiet confidence that you're guided, held, and never truly alone. Not because everything is under control, but because you've chosen to trust even when it's not. That's where power begins, right where your control ends. When we speak of prayer, it's easy to reduce it to words whispered into silence or rituals performed out of routine. But prayer, at its most powerful, doesn't start with sound, it starts with intention, because not all prayers are spoken. Some are lived without intention. Prayer is like sending a message without knowing who it's meant for or why you're sending it. It becomes noise in the soul, empty, directionless. But when the heart and mind align, when your deepest values fuel your most urgent hopes, prayer transforms. It becomes your compass, pointing not just to what you want, but to who you are becoming. In Christianity, the heart that prays with faith is said to move mountains not through magic, but through clarity, conviction, and a vision anchored in love. The Quran tells us that the divine is near to every soul that calls sincerely. It's not the length of the words or the eloquence of the voice that draws this closeness, it's the purity of presence. The fact that your heart means it. Hinduism teaches that even the simplest offering becomes sacred when done with spiritual alignment. It is not the form, but the focus, not the volume, but the vibration of the soul that makes prayer soar. When you pray with intention, your life begins to mirror your prayers. You become more mindful of your actions, more aware of your choices, more deliberate with your time and energy. Each act becomes an extension of that prayerful posture, quiet yes to the sacred, and that is the beginning of transformation. Because intention doesn't stay still. It ripples outward. It turns longing into movement, vision into steps. When your prayer is filled with intention, it no longer ends with amen. It continues in how you show up, how you speak, how you love. Suddenly, every kind word, every act of compassion, every moment of courage becomes a sacred echo of that inner plea. And it's in this space where intention meets action that the ordinary becomes holy. Your daily routines become offerings. Your struggles become sacred ground for growth. Your victories are no longer just personal, they're reflections of divine partnership. So live your prayers. Let your feet carry what your heart believes. Let your choices preach louder than your words. And let the sincerity of your intention breathe life into everything you touch. That is the kind of prayer that flies not only to the heavens, but straight into the world, changing it one sacred step at a time. Change doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or grand events. Sometimes it begins quietly within us, long before circumstances shift or outcomes unfold. Transformation takes root in the inner world, and it starts with prayer and intention. Prayer gently rewires our thinking. It teaches us to pause, reflect, and listen. Rather than spiraling in fear or frustration, we begin to center ourselves in something deeper, intention. On the other hand, steers our actions. It sets the tone for how we move, choose, and respond. Together, they act as a sacred partnership, one anchoring the heart, the other guiding the hands, before peace is visible on the outside. It must be planted on the inside. That's where the real work begins, in the soil of our storms. Not in avoidance, but in awareness. Not in numbing, but in nurturing. Buddhism teaches that a focused mind grounded in right thought and purpose can rise above suffering. It's not about escaping pain, but seeing through it with clarity and compassion. In Sikhism, prayer isn't confined to temples or times of day. It's remembrance, staying awake to the divine presence within every breath, every step. And Judaism reminds us that in times of hardship, when the soul is weary and the answers are far, prayer becomes our most honest language, reaching out for comfort, for clarity, for connection. When prayer becomes more than habit, and intention more than concept, our posture changes. We walk through life steadier, less reactive, more reflective, less shaken, more anchored. Our worth no longer tied to what we can control, but who we are becoming in the process. We stop praying for the storm to stop. We start praying for the grace to move through it, for the wisdom to find meaning in it, for the courage to grow because of it. And that's when the world begins to shift, because we have. We become calmer in chaos, stronger in sorrow, and more compassionate through challenge. We don't need perfect conditions to find peace. We create peace by how we carry what's imperfect. So let prayer soften your heart before life hardens it. Let intention pull you forward when fear pulls you back. The journey doesn't begin when the obstacles vanish. It begins the moment you choose to walk through them, awake, aware, and aligned. That's how we rise, first within, then beyond. So pray not just when you're broken, but when you're whole. Not just when you're afraid, but when you're ready to rise. Set your intention like a flame in the dark. Let it guide your hands, your heart, your hope, because prayer isn't a rescue line. It's a lifeline to your truest self, and intention is the map that brings your soul home.